Okay, panelists, I would like to start today by outlining a specific scenario and getting your reaction to it. Let's suppose that we're in the midst of a United States Senate race, and it's a race between an incumbent senator named Joe Lambo, who has completed 2 terms as a Wisconsin Senate member of Congress. And he's a fairly popular guy, but he's facing a tough challenge from an up-and-comer, a woman named Mary Starr. And Mary Starr's a compelling candidate. She's a small business owner, and she's a former officer in the United States Army and served overseas in the First Gulf War. Senator Lambo is on Capitol Hill, decides to go out to a local bar and meet a friend for a drink. While they are there, they're approached by 2 young men who present themselves as staffers for another senator. And so Joe Lambo, being affable, sort of invites them into the conversation, and they start talking about politics, and it becomes an increasingly candid and unguarded conversation. And so at some point, these 2 young men ask Senator Lambo about foreign policy and Wisconsin voters. And he just sort of scoffs and he says, Wisconsin voters are idiots when it comes to foreign policy. It's just not something they think about. And so it makes no sense for me to even talk about it. And so a few more beers in, now he's not intoxicated, but he's getting a little tuned up. They ask him about his opponent, Mary Starr. And he sort of bristles at this point and says, they ask him specifically why she had been refusing to debate him. And so it gets his dander up a bit, and he says, she's a coward. She is a coward, and the voters of Wisconsin need to know this. And so at that point, he turns on a heel and leaves the bar. So, Sophia Nelson, I want you to put on your political strategist hat here. You've been a political candidate before. You've worked on campaigns in the past. Let me tell you the rest of this story. These 2 young men who approached Senator Lambo were not staffers at all. They were secretly recording him with a hidden camera and recorded this whole conversation. They were, in fact, just a couple of enterprising, avid partisans who set out that day to catch video of Senator Lambo when his guard was down. So now if you're working on Mary Starr's campaign and you're advisor to the campaign, you are going to have some fun with this video, I would think, right?
A lot of fun.
All right, tell me how you might use this.
Well, if I'm the campaign manager and these enterprising young men come to me and show me this video, I can't wait to call up my political ad guys and have them do a 30-second spot and say something like, Lambo unguarded in the bar or something. I don't know. It'll be more exciting than that. But and then we'd run the spot. I wouldn't hesitate to do it.
Okay, it's going to get out there. You're going to make sure it gets out there one way or the other, right?
But I'm not going to do it from our campaign. I would probably, and this is sneaky to say, but I'll say it, I'd probably contact some of my friends in what we call third-party campaign ads, like, you know, they're what do you call them, 501c3s, and they kind of do these advocacy ads for grassroots, et cetera. And I'd probably not do it from our campaign, although being that my candidate is a decorated veteran, I think you said, and he says the people of Wisconsin are stupid and they don't understand foreign policy, and then slams my person who's put on a uniform, I'm assuming he has not. I might do a different ad on that one, but definitely a third-party advocacy group would make sure they knew about that.
Is this fair to Senator Lambo?
Yeah, he said it.
So why is it that you want to disassociate yourself with the video and have these kind of, you know, shady figures in the background be the ones to expose
That's the way the game is played. Whether we like it or not, that's the world we live in now. It's the world of sound bites and ads. And if you remember the Kerry campaign and Bush campaign, he got swift-boated, I think they call it. Here was a guy who had put on the uniform, actually gone to Vietnam. Now, there were questions about what he did or didn't do, but President Bush had been in the Air National Guard and hadn't gone anywhere. And I'm a Republican saying this. So the fact of the matter is that, you know, they swift-boated John Kerry and they beat him on it.
All right, well, you're going to make sure one way or another that this becomes part of the narrative about the campaign between Lambo and Starr, right? That's a separate question, though, than whether or not it's newsworthy. You're approaching it from a particular vantage point. Ron Smith, you are an editor at the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. Just looking at the raw video here, is this something that is newsworthy?
I would say it's newsworthy. I'm a fan of what I call evidence-based journalism, though. What we do with that is another thing. It is newsworthy that here's a candidate who should know better to go to a bar and speak ill of someone, although it was done with fraud in mind. We would probably take a look at it and say, and tell the readers how it came to be.
Why should he know better?
Why should he know better?
He's out there having a beer with some people, and you know, he thinks it's a social encounter. Why should he feel like he's on stage at that moment?
Well, life's a stage if you're a politician, and I think that you have to know what you have to have your standards. You are the person 24/7. You don't know who's going to be eavesdropping, who's going to be listening. And he said something that was pretty hurtful about another candidate. So it gives us a glimpse into his character.
Okay, so it's an unscripted moment. And Raquel Rutledge, you are a Pulitzer Prize winning reporter for the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. Congratulations on that.
Thank you. Thanks.
What do you think about this? Is it newsworthy?
I do think it's newsworthy. I think it's something that voters deserve to know. If he's talking candidly about voters and his perspective of what how he views Wisconsin voters, I absolutely think they deserve to know. It's the truth. It's what he said and how he said it, and that needs to be reported as well. So, and his quotes need to be taken in context. I can see a big headline saying, Joe Lambo calls Wisconsin voters idiots. And idiots on foreign policy, and that's specific, and you need to have it all-inclusive, but I absolutely think it needs to be out there.
Okay. Is it newsworthy in part just because we're not used to seeing candidates in these unscripted forums? There's no teleprompters and handlers, and so that's part of the kind of voyeuristic appeal of this? I mean, is what he said really all that remarkable? I mean, aren't we idiots when it comes to foreign policy? How many Wisconsin voters sit there and puzzle over the complex policy proposals of candidates when it comes to foreign policy?
Well, I think it is that access. We don't often have that. More and more we do have access. Candidates are making themselves more accessible. But because we don't often get those we're not often invited to sit down for a beer with Joe Lambo. So we don't get to have that dialogue. So anytime you get a glimpse of something that's unscripted, we love it. Readers love it.
Tom Grimes, Dr. Grimes, you are formerly a broadcast journalist and now a professor. This is a no-brainer, isn't it? I mean, we've got a political candidate, a United States senator, saying his voters are dumb and his opponent's a coward.
The issue, I think, here, the moderating issue, is whether you're going to gawk at this as a journalist. Senator, do you think Wisconsin voters are dumb? Senator, and chase them with a mic. Mm-hmm. Or are you going to try as a journalist to understand what this man was trying to say? And I take the view that you ought to try to understand what it was he was getting at and not gawk at him as if he were a traffic accident victim on the side of the highway.
You think it's going to go down that way? We're not going to see teasers on the news.
Oh, you will.
Saying
that's part
Senator
of the
Lambo in some hot water this evening over comments he made at a bar. Tune in at 10. Isn't that how it's going to be played?
Yeah, but let me tell you something. I don't have as much broadcast experience as, say, Chris Bury here with ABC News, but I had enough experience to know on occasion it is very easy for members of the press to get in there and stir the pot and just create chaos when government is a very delicate and fragile entity, I think. And so I have some social responsibility not to just go in and bomb throw, but to try to understand and interpret.
You've all suggested that this is newsworthy on some level, but are you going to use it? And how do you use it? So, Chris Bury, you have been a reporter and anchor for ABC News for many years. These two young guys come to you. They want this national platform for their video. And it falls in your lap. And they say,
first, I'm going to corroborate it. I'm going to talk to other people who were there to see if, in fact, that's what was said and the way it was said. I'm going to check to see if that tape was somehow edited out of context. I'm going to call my lawyer, ABC lawyer in New York, to find out if, in fact, we can use that material legally, because it may have been recorded illegally. So I'm going to do those things first to make sure that it's legitimate. And then, absolutely, it's a story on the grounds we've discussed. If you have a senator in the middle of a campaign accusing his candidate, his opponent who served in the military, being a coward, de facto, that's a story.